877. That is the save percentage the goaltender. The Toronto Maple Leafs just handed $21 million to posted last season. .877. In the modern NHL, that is not a starter's number. That is a number that gets a goalie pulled in the second period and traded by March. The Maple Leafs signed him anyway. On the 1st of July, Toronto gave Sergei Bobrovsky a 3-year contract worth $21 million, $7 million a season, and by the end of it, he will be 41 years old. He is 37 right now. He went 27-23 and won with the Florida Panthers last year with a .307 goals against average, and Toronto looked at that and decided he was the answer to the only question that has actually mattered in this city for a decade. So here is the real reason they did it, and it has nothing to do with last season's numbers. Sergei Bobrovsky is the only goaltender on the planet who has won the Stanley Cup in back-to-back years in the last decade, 2024 and 2025, both with Florida, and across those two championship runs he went 32-15. 2 Vezina trophies before that, in 2013 and 2017. Toronto did not sign the regular season. Toronto signed the postseason. The bet, stated plainly, is that Bobrovsky's regular season decline is real and irrelevant, and that the version of him that shows up in April is still the best big-game goalie alive. And here is the part almost nobody outside this fan base is talking about. The kid who might make the whole contract unnecessary is already in the building. Artur Akhtyamov just won the Calder Cup with the Toronto Marlies and was named the most valuable player of the entire playoff run. 14 wins and 7 losses, a .222 goals against average, a .923 save percentage, and 20 saves in the game that clinched the championship. He is 24. He has never played an NHL game. That is the whole story in one sentence. Toronto committed 3 years and $21 million to a 37-year-old, 6 weeks after their own prospect won a professional championship and the trophy that goes with it. Now let's go back and look at how the Maple Leafs got desperate enough to make this move, because the context matters. Last season was the worst one Toronto has had in 10 years. 32 wins, 36 regulation losses, 14 overtime losses. 78 points. Out of the playoffs for the first time since 2015-16, after the biggest single-season points collapse in franchise history. And goaltending was not a side plot in that collapse. It was the spine of it. Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz combined for 65 starts, and both of them finished the season with save percentages below .900. When both of your goalies stop the puck at a below-average rate for a full year, nothing else you do on the ice survives it. So the front office blew the position up. On the 16th of June, Toronto traded Joseph Woll and defenseman Simon Benoit to Philadelphia for goaltender Samuel Ersson and defenseman Emil Andrae. 2 weeks later, on free agency day, they signed Bobrovsky. In 15 days, the Maple Leafs replaced the goalie they had drafted and developed with a 37-year-old on the way down and a change of scenery import from the Flyers. There is one detail in the Bobrovsky signing that suggests the room is thinking clearly, though. Anthony Stolarz is still here, and Stolarz and Bobrovsky already know each other, because Stolarz was in Florida's crease rotation the year the Panthers won their first cup in 2023-24. That is not 2 strangers being handed the same net. That is a tandem that has already shared a dressing room during a championship. In a market where goaltending controversies get invented on talk radio by the second week of October, that history is worth more than it looks on paper. There is also a third goalie in this conversation that most of the coverage has skipped. Samuel Ersson came the other way in the Woll trade, and he is not a throw-in. He is a goaltender who has started NHL games in Philadelphia and who gives Toronto insurance if the 37-year-old's body decides the schedule is too long. 3 goalies with NHL experience and 1 Calder Cup MVP is not a shortage. It is a traffic jam. And all of this is happening inside a front office that is being rebuilt underneath the roster. On the 29th of July, the Maple Leafs announced 3 more hires. Dan Palango as Director of Amateur Scouting, Brad Rawson as Vice President of Research and Development, and J.P. Perpich as Director of U.S. Scouting. The latest stage of General Manager John Chayka's overhaul of how this organization finds and evaluates players. That is a long-term project. The Bobrovsky contract is the opposite of a long-term project. Toronto is running both at once, which brings us back to the 24-year-old in the American Hockey League, because his season deserves to be described properly rather than waved at. The Marlies did not sneak into the Calder Cup. They went 16-8 through 4 rounds and then a 5th, becoming just the 3rd team in the history of the AHL to win 5 series in a single postseason. They beat Rochester, then Laval, then Cleveland, then Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and then took Chicago in 5, closing it out with a 4-3 win in the deciding game. Akhtyamov was in the net for the entire run, and when it was over, the league handed him the playoff MVP award, the one that usually goes to a forward who scored 25 points. Ask any goalie coach what that means, and you get the same answer. 21 playoff games in 7 weeks is the closest thing minor league hockey has to an NHL postseason. Same compressed schedule, same travel, same pressure to be perfect on the 3rd night in 4. Akhtyamov did it and came out with a 9-2-3. That is not a hot week. That is a goaltender who held up under exactly the conditions the Maple Leafs are paying Bobrovsky $7 million a year to survive. Tell me in the comments which side you are on before I get to the ugly part. Bobrovsky for 3 years, or hand the net to the kid who just won the Calder Cup. Be specific, because I actually read these. Now, the ugly part, the math. Goaltenders age badly, and they age badly in a very specific way. The numbers hold up in the playoffs long after they stop holding up in November. Bobrovsky is signed through his 40th going on 41st season. Almost no goalie in NHL history has been a legitimate number 1 at 41. The contract does not expire before the risk arrives. The risk arrives in year 2 and stays. And if Toronto's actual plan is to hand the net to Akhtyamov in a season or 2, they will be paying $7 million a year to a backup while doing it. There is also the version where the bet just works. Bobrovsky's last 2 Junets are not ancient history. They are 2024 and 2025. He stopped pucks well enough to win 8 rounds of playoff hockey in 2 years. If Toronto's roster around him is better than last year's, and with Gavin McKenna, the first overall pick of the 2026 draft, arriving alongside Austin Matthews and William Nylander, it should be. Then a goalie who peaks in April is exactly the piece a team that has not won a cup since 1967 has been missing. That is the argument, and it is not a stupid one. What makes this the most interesting story in Toronto right now is that both things can be true at once. Bobrovsky can be the wrong contract and the right goalie. Akhtyamov can be ready and still spend a season watching. And the Maple Leafs, a team that just finished 29th in the league and won a draft lottery, have decided to run a win-now goalie plan and a develop-now goalie plan in the same building at the same time. Toronto's first game of the season is roughly 2 months away. By Christmas, one of these 2 goaltenders will have the net, and the other will have become the biggest talking point in Canadian hockey. So give me your prediction. Does Sergei Bobrovsky start more than 50 games for the Maple Leafs this season? Or does Artur Akhtyamov take the job before the calendar turns? Drop it below, and tell me what your gut says about a 37-year-old signed until 41. I'm reading every single one.